So what are the long-term effects of trade wars / trade diversion, and what are the day-to-day effects?
So the day-to-day effects, I'll start with the last part first. The day-to-day effects are going to be higher prices on those goods for which the tariffs have been applied. The long-term effects are going to be lower potential GDP growth and less investment and probably a decline in consumption. And that is what results in the lower long-term GDP growth and therefore lower standards of living for our future citizens.
If policymakers don't see the potential GDP growth and are only looking at the real growth line, what are the priorities of policymakers, do you think?
So I think it's important that policymakers understand that one of their objectives should be to build current and long-term growth, so to try to reach that long-term growth potential and try to avoid making policies that lower that. Just looking at near-term growth is often a mistake of policymakers, particularly those that are elected, because they're worried about election. But I think it's really important that we think about sort of the long-term competitiveness and ability of the economy to provide good jobs and good standards of living.
Okay, great. And the last one. What discussions around reforming the WTO have there been, and what do you think should be the elements of that reform?
So reform at the WTO is really up to WTO members. It's not really up to people like me, but I can tell you what's being discussed. We see discussions around the regular work of the WTO, how the committees function and those kinds of things that could make it more efficient, more effective, how members exchange information. That exchange of information is what we call notifications transparency at the WTO. Transparency is very important for reducing uncertainty. So the regular work of the committees as well as around transparency are two areas that are discussed. Making good efforts to reform the appellate body process, it would be very important to the future of the global trading system. And then we have the joint initiatives around e-commerce, around investment facilitation, micro, small, medium-sized enterprises, and domestic regulation, where groups of members have come together to talk about potential ways to go forward in setting new rules in these areas.